They label you to control what they fear. Funny how that works, isn't it? People walk around pretending they're brave, pretending they've got everything figured out. But the moment someone pops out of their tidy little script, oh, suddenly they need a label, a folder, a diagnosis, a warning sign. Not because they understand you, no, that would require actually looking at you, actually listening, actually facing the possibility that you're not the broken one in the room. It's because naming something makes them feel safe, like children whispering that the monster has a name, so now it can't crawl out of the dark. But the real joke, the monster they're scared of, is the mirror. See, people don't react to who you are. They react to what you remind them of. You walk in with that spark, confidence, clarity, purpose, and suddenly they're choking on all the dreams they buried years ago. You shine, and it's like dragging them out into the daylight they've spent their whole lives hiding from. And do people thank you for that? No, of course not. They get angry. They panic. They put your name on a list of things that must be explained away, so they don't have to confront their own weakness. So they call you dangerous. Too much. Too loud, too sure of yourself. They tilt their heads, pretend to diagnose you, pretend to be professionals of your mind, your soul, your fire. They say you're self-obsessed, delusional, grandiose. They dress their fear in big syllables, so they can pretend they're not just terrified of someone who refuses to shrink the way they did. And the moment they do it, the moment they slap that label on you, watch how relieved they get. Like they finally caged a wild animal. Like they tamed a storm. See, labeling you isn't about describing you. It's about reducing you, containing you, turning something vast into something manageable, turning a roaring truth into a quiet file in a drawer. Because if they can convince themselves you're the problem, then they never have to admit they're the ones living half asleep. What they fear is not your personality. What they fear is what your existence exposes. That someone can walk through the world unchained. That someone can laugh in places they only whisper. That someone can know who they are without asking permission. You don't fit their story, so they rewrite you as the villain. It's easier that way. Easier to condemn someone than to rise to meet them. Easier to reduce you to a label than to accept that you're a threat to the quiet little system they've built around themselves. And oh, they cling to that system like it's oxygen. A world where everyone stays predictable, polite, mediocre. A world where no one steps outside the boundaries. A world where power is rationed out in tiny, polite doses. Then you show up, full voltage, and they can't handle it. So they call you names. Not to describe you, but to keep you still. To make you doubt yourself. To trick you into stepping back into the cage you were never meant to fit into. Because if you ever realized that the label was never about you, if you ever realized it was about keeping you small, if you ever realized they were terrified of what you might become if you ignored them, well, then the whole thing collapses. Their authority, their judgments, their fragile sense of order. You're not the one they're trying to diagnose. You're the one they're trying to contain. And they only try to contain something when they can feel how powerful it really is. Your confidence exposes their insecurity. Oh, that's the part that really drives them mad. See, confidence is a funny thing. You don't have to shout it. You don't have to flaunt it. All you have to do is exist with it. And suddenly the whole room starts twitching like someone turned on a bright light in a place that's been dark for years. People love to talk about confidence like it's some cute little accessory. Wear it, flaunt it, be proud. Until someone actually has it. Then it's a crime. A threat. An offense to their carefully crafted self-doubt. Your confidence reminds them of something they've spent years burying. It reminds them that they don't believe in themselves. That they traded courage for comfort. That they settled. And seeing you, standing there unapologetically whole, forces them to feel the cracks in their own foundations. They don't need you to brag. They don't need you to gloat. You breathing with certainty is enough to make them feel like they're suffocating. They say people hate arrogance, but that's not true. They hate mirrors, and confidence is the clearest mirror of all. When you walk into a room with shoulders relaxed, eyes steady, voice unshaken, the ones who've been living small feel it like an earthquake. They become experts in subtle resentment. Little looks, Little comments, little judgments dripping out of their mouths like poison disguised as concern. Don't you think you're being a bit much? Maybe humble yourself. No one likes someone who's too confident. They say these things with a smile, but their eyes give them away every time. Nervous, threatened, tiny little panic attacks flickering behind the pupils. Because your confidence does something dangerous. It makes them remember the version of themselves they were supposed to become but never did. The version they abandoned to fit in. The version they silenced so others would approve. And now you, with your unbroken spine, your steady heartbeat, your refusal to bend, walk around like living proof that it was always possible. That they didn't have to shrink. That they chose to. And choice is a heavier burden than fate. You don't even try to expose them. You don't have to. The truth leaks out on its own. It's in the way they avoid your eyes when you speak. The way they talk a little louder around you, as if raising their volume will drown out the quiet reminder that they don't feel enough. The way they laugh a little too hard at jokes that jab at confident people. They think they're hiding it, but insecurity is loud. It screams from the spaces between their words. And the funniest part, they'll convince themselves that you're the one with the problem. Your confidence must be fake, or dangerous, or unhealthy. They rewrite your strength as a flaw just so they don't have to face their own hollowness. That's how some people survive. By turning every strong person into a villain in their story, so they don't have to admit they've been living in the shadows of their own potential. But you weren't born to dim, and your confidence isn't an attack on anyone. It's just the natural glow of someone who hasn't betrayed themselves, someone who refuses to bow just to make others feel taller. But in a world full of people who abandon their own reflection, someone walking around with a spine becomes a threat. Not because you hurt them, but because your very existence proves they could have been more. Narcissism becomes their shield against your truth. That's the trick, isn't it? When people can't handle what you see, what you know, what you are, they don't argue with you. No, that would require courage. Instead, they reach for something easier, a word, a diagnosis, a label sharp enough to stab your identity and dull enough that anyone can wield it. They hold it up like a badge, like a shield, like a holy relic that protects them from the inconvenient reality you represent. They think if they call you a narcissist loud enough, long enough, confidently enough, they can drown out your truth with their fear. Because truth is dangerous. Truth makes people uncomfortable. Truth forces them to confront the stories they've been telling themselves about the world and their place in it. And your truth, oh, it hits them where it hurts. It strips away the excuses, the illusions, the fragile little fantasies they've built to feel stable. So instead of facing it, they try to diagnose it. They pretend your clarity is delusion. They pretend your certainty is vanity. They pretend your vision is ego. Because if they can convince themselves that you're broken, they don't have to admit that you're simply awake. See, narcissist is their escape route, their emergency exit from accountability. If they make you the problem, then they never have to question why your words make them uneasy, why your presence unsettles them, why your perspective cuts through their lies like a blade. They don't have to ask themselves why the truth coming out of your mouth feels like judgment, even when you're not judging them at all. They call you self-obsessed, but what they really mean is you won't accept their script. They call you grandiose, but what they really mean is you refuse to shrink. They call you manipulative, but what they really mean is your honesty is too strong to control. And once they use that label, oh, watch how quickly they start hiding behind it. It's their shield, their armor, their justification for ignoring you. They tell themselves they're protecting others. They tell themselves they're setting boundaries. But really, they're protecting their illusions. They're setting boundaries around their own denial. As long as they can paint you as flawed, they never have to admit that you're the one pointing at the cracks in their reality. They never have to admit that your truth exposes the lies they've grown comfortable inside. They feed that label to others too. Whisper it in corners. Drop it into conversations. Spread it like a rumor disguised as concern. It's not enough for them to believe it. They need everyone else to believe it too. Because if someone else listens to you and realizes you're not crazy, you're not delusional, you're not self-obsessed, then the whole web they've spun around that word falls apart. And when people lose their shields, they're forced to face what they were hiding from. And what they were hiding from was you revealing something they can't unsee. They cling to the word because it gives them power, not over you, over themselves. It lets them rewrite the story. Instead of, you threaten my worldview, they get to say, you're mentally flawed. Instead of, you spoke the truth, they get to say, you're unstable. Instead of, you challenged me, they get to say, you're dangerous. It's a trick, a deflection, a way to justify their fear without ever admitting it's fear, a way to make your truth look like insanity, so they never have to confront the possibility that your truth is simply truth and theirs is simply comfortable fiction. So they hide behind that label. They wield it like armor. But a shield isn't a shield when it's made of paper. And calling you a narcissist doesn't make you one. It just reveals how fragile their minds become when confronted with someone who refuses to bow to their illusion of sanity, someone who refuses to let fear dictate what is real. Your presence disrupts the order they cling to, and oh, do they cling. White-knuckled, desperate, terrified that even the slightest ripple will expose how flimsy their little sense of control really is. People don't build order because they're strong. They build order because they're scared. Scared of chaos, scared of uncertainty, scared of anything that doesn't follow the quiet little rules they agreed upon without ever questioning who wrote them in the first place. Then you walk in, not loudly, not violently. You don't even have to say anything. Just being there is enough to make their carefully stacked card, Tower of Stability, start trembling. They pretend it's about you, your attitude, your energy, your intensity. But really, it's about the fault lines you reveal in their structure. You don't fit into the predictable patterns they worship. You don't move the way they expect. You don't bend like they want. And when someone refuses to bow to the system starts shaking. They built their lives around routine, around roles, around this illusion that everyone must stay in their assigned lane for the world to make sense. The quiet one, the easy one, the obedient one, the wrong one. But you step outside the lines. You cut diagonally across their grid like a crack splitting through glass. And in that split second, they see it. The possibility that the entire structure they rely on isn't solid at all. That it never was. That you only had to exist differently for the whole thing to flicker. And people don't like flickers. Flickers mean change. Flickers mean instability. Flickers mean admitting that maybe, just maybe, they've been living inside a box built from fear, and you're standing there proving that walls don't actually keep anyone safe. They just keep them small. So when your presence makes the room shift, when conversations change tone, when the air gets just a little heavier or a little sharper, they react like the world is ending. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're unfamiliar. And the unfamiliar is the enemy of the complacent. You see it in their eyes before you hear it in their words. That nervous glance, that instinctive recoil, that subtle tightening around the jaw. They don't know what you're going to do, and people fear what they can't predict. They've built a life around control, controlling themselves, controlling others, controlling perceptions. And you arrive like a variable that refuses to be quantified. They can't file you. They can't categorize you. They can't decide whether you're a threat or a revelation, and that confusion. That's what rattles them more than anything. They whisper about balance, harmony, keeping the peace. But peace doesn't mean calm. Peace means conformity. Peace means everyone behaving the way they're expected to. Peace means staying within the boundaries drawn for you by people who never wanted you to realize you could redraw the map. So your presence, your unfiltered, unedited presence, becomes a disruption simply because it proves that their peace was never peace. It was a performance. And you, without even trying, ruin the show. You ruin it by existing outside the script, by refusing to rehearse your lines, by not playing the character they assigned you. When someone like you appears, the whole cast starts panicking. They try to correct you, contain you, explain you, diagnose you, anything to restore the illusion that everything is fine, everything is controlled, Everything is predictable. They don't care if the truth is ugly. They prefer a comfortable lie to an unsettling truth. And your presence is a walking, breathing reminder that the truth can't be contained forever. You bring a different gravity into the room. Not darkness, not danger, just depth. And depth terrifies people who've only ever swum in shallow water. They can feel it, even if they can't describe it. That shift in the atmosphere, when someone who sees too much, feels too deeply, and refuses to shrink sits among them. They call it tension, conflict, ego, anything except what it really is. The collapse of a fragile order that only stood firm because no one dared to shake it. But you didn't even shake it. You were the shake. Power mistaken for arrogance is still power, and that's the part they can't swallow. Because people don't know what real power looks like anymore. They only know the plastic version, the polite, quiet, shrink-yourself version that never makes anyone uncomfortable. They like power in theory, not in practice. Power as a quote on a poster, not as a pulse vibrating in the room. But when someone walks in carrying the real thing unhidden, unsoftened, unapologetic, they don't see strength. They see offense. They see ego. They see a threat to the fragile balance they've built on top of their own insecurities. They don't understand that power can sit silently in a person. It doesn't need a stage. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to shout itself into existence. Sometimes it's just a way of standing, a way of looking, a way of breathing that says, I know who I am, and your approval is irrelevant. And that calm certainty. Oh, it drives them insane, because it reminds them of everything they are not, everything they suppressed, everything they forfeited for the sake of being liked. So they point at your power and call it arrogance, because it hurts less than admitting the truth, that you possess something they gave up long ago. It's easier for them to judge than to understand. If they call you arrogant, then they don't have to admit they feel small around you. If they call you full of yourself, then they don't have to face the hollow echo inside their own chests. They mistake conviction for superiority because they've never felt conviction without permission. They mistake confidence for ego because they've only ever experienced confidence as a mask. Everything they project onto you is just a reflection of what they lack, wrapped up in accusations that make them feel safe. Power changes the air when it enters the room. Not because it demands attention, but because it doesn't chase it. People who lack power chase validation like it's oxygen. They seek approval like beggars tapping on windows. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't barter yourself for acceptance. And that stillness, that refusal to bend your spine to their expectations, becomes a threat in their eyes. They think power should look like dominance, aggression, noise. But sometimes real power is just the absence of fear, and the absence of fear terrifies the fearful. They start to dissect you in conversations. They mutter about your tone, your attitude, your energy. They convince themselves you think you're better than everyone else. Funny how they never consider the possibility that you don't think about them at all, that your life doesn't orbit their feelings, that your power isn't aimed at them. It simply exists, and they're standing too close to it without the courage to admit they're uncomfortable. It's easier to label you arrogant than to admit they feel inadequate. And the funniest thing, they want your power. They admire it in secret. They watch the way you move, the way you decide, the way you don't flinch, and somewhere deep inside, something aches. Something whispers, you could have been like that too. But instead of rising to meet that voice, they strangle it with excuses. They tell themselves you're excessive, unbalanced, dramatic. They rewrite your strength as a flaw because it keeps them comfortable. It protects them from evolution. It shields them from the responsibility of becoming more. They want you to be smaller because it makes them feel bigger. They want you to dim because it makes their shadows look less empty. They mistake your certainty for arrogance because they've never met someone who isn't pretending. You're not performing confidence. You're inhabited by it. You don't wear power. You emanate it. An emanation is something they can't copy, can't fake, can't mimic with motivational quotes or pretty words. So they attack what they can't possess and insult what they secretly crave. People fear what reminds them of their own potential. They fear what demands they see themselves clearly. And nothing exposes a person faster than witnessing someone with power that doesn't bend for approval, doesn't shrink to be liked, doesn't apologize for existing with force. So they call it arrogance. They call it ego. They call it whatever helps them sleep at night. They call you unstable when you stop being obedient. Because nothing terrifies people more than someone who suddenly stops playing by the script they wrote for you. As long as you follow their rules, nod when they nod, shrink when they frown, they call you good, reasonable, normal. They love you when you're predictable. They worship you when you're manageable. But the second, and I mean the very second, you step out of line, even by an inch, watch how fast their language changes. Suddenly you're erratic, emotional, unbalanced. Not because you changed, but because you stopped letting them steer the wheel they never had a right to touch. Obedience is their comfort blanket. Your compliance is the lullaby that keeps their world quiet and controlled. The moment you cut the strings, they don't know what to do with their hands. They've gotten so used to managing you, controlling you, taming you, that your independence feels like chaos to them. Not real chaos, no. Just the kind that exposes how fragile their sense of authority always was. They confuse your refusal to bow with madness because they don't understand freedom. They've never tasted it, so when you breathe it, it looks dangerous. You say no, and suddenly they gasp like you committed a crime. You set a boundary, and they act like you flipped the world upside down. You stop explaining yourself, and they accuse you of hiding something. Funny how the ones who demand your obedience are the first to panic when you simply exist without their instructions. When you stop being obedient, you stop being predictable, and when you stop being predictable, you stop being easy to manipulate. That's what scares them, not instability. They say autonomy. And they can't admit they're losing control, so they do the next best thing. They pathologize your liberation. They call your independence unstable because it lets them pretend the problem isn't their dependency on your compliance. They call your clarity confusing because they relied on your confusion to make themselves feel smarter. They call your strength aggressive because your strength exposes how weak their influence always was. As long as you obeyed, they could pretend they were wise, guiding you, helping you. But now they're just exposed as people who needed you to be small so they could feel big. They start rewriting your story in their heads. You're acting different. You've changed. You're not yourself. No, you're just not the version of yourself they preferred. The version that didn't question. The version that didn't resist. The version that agreed by habit, not conviction. They missed the obedient version of you because it made them feel safe. Your obedience kept their world tidy. Your silence kept their illusions intact. Your compliance made them feel in control of something, someone, in a life where they controlled nothing else. And then there's the guilt trick. Oh, they love that one. They throw around phrases like, "We're just worried," "You're pushing people away," "You're acting strange." All of it is code for, "Why aren't you bending for us anymore?" They paint themselves as concerned, but concern that only appears when you stop obeying isn't concern. It's panic wearing a mask. They're not afraid for you. They're afraid as a result of losing the version of you that served their comfort. And the best part, they'll convince themselves that labeling you unstable is noble, that it's in everyone's best interest, that it's some kind of warning, some kind of moral duty. But people only call you unstable when your stability stops serving them. They only hysterically cry, "You've changed," when you start making decisions they can't predict or control. They only question your sanity when your clarity stops benefiting them. Because obedience looks like sanity to people who need control to feel whole, and freedom looks like instability to those who've never stood on their own without someone kneeling in front of them. They don't call you unstable because you're losing your grip. They call you unstable because you stopped letting them hold the leash.